Okay, so now I'm back. Ended up getting the new water pump in. The new water pump, of course, is a little different than the original one. Not much. Of course, the impeller, you can see the big difference right there. How that impeller is all chewed up and how that one's all nice and straight. Okay, so next part is, this kit came with, I guess I could do an unboxing right here, but the kit came with all the gaskets and seals that I need. On top of that, I have the upper housing, to which, yes, I know this one's white, but as you can see, the differences in the housings, they have, you see the steel in this one and this one here. You can see where I kind of peeled away some of the stuff where the impeller melted. Okay. Also, you get the tube that goes in here for the water feed tube. And you also have the lower plate, or I should say the lower housing for that. That would go on the shaft, just, basically just like this. Now the next step is to turn around and get this piece here, which is this lower housing, and this one in this case is of course blue. I'm going to try to force it up a little bit, get it to break the seal. I'm just using a little flathead screwdriver just to pry it up a little ways. There we go. Now I'm just going to slide this up off of the shaft, just like that. That's the one that was also damaged. It's not too badly damaged, but there is quite a bit of damage inside the housing here, where you can kind of see the melting where it rubbed against that housing. And of course, at this point, you can kind of see down inside pretty much where the oiling takes place and all that. Of course, the shaft there and the bearing that's inside there. And then of course there's going to be a seal. You can kind of see some of the material there that I haven't got all out of it just yet. And of course the old housing had, the seal looks pretty good there, so it didn't let oil pass through up into that section, passed into the impeller. But again, you still see problems with the melting of this section here, here, and here. And it's in pretty bad shape. Of course, we got our new kit that has the O-rings, the gaskets, and all that material that will go into getting the lower plate back in order. I've also got just some Master Pro, multi-purpose water-resistant marine grease. And of course our housing, that's here. As you can see, it's in good shape. There's brand new, obviously. Again, our water tube, the new impeller. Get some of that stuff off of it. The new impeller and the old impeller. Of course, over time they'll develop a little bit of memory, but that's to be expected. The new lower housing, which is the same housing as what we have here. So these two housings are identical. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of the marine grease. Just going to take a little bit, not much, just a little dab. And I'm just going to rub it inside the housing here for the gasket and the seals, just to make sure they're all lubricated up so it slides over the shaft with no problems. One thing I want to mention though for sure is this O-ring, of course, is in the kit, but I'm taking a little dab of grease and I'm just rubbing it around the O-ring so it makes a good seal without damaging the O-ring. Again, just making sure I've got a good light coating on there. Slide it back down the shaft, get it lined up, and basically you just kind of pop it into place. Doesn't take much force, just a little bit, and it'll line up. Now, next step is we have our housing that's right here. I'm going to again take a little bit of grease. I'm just going to kind of line it real lightly in the housing. Get it on the top, get it on the sides. That way it's not a dry fit whenever you put your impeller in. Okay, so after lubricating the housing just slightly, not much, light coat. I did put a little light coat inside the hub there where it slides over the shaft here. Then you've got your gasket and your lower plate. And as you recall, the lower plate, they look identical. And remember that your grooves, your sharp edges, go to the downward direction. So now, in order to put this gasket on, I'm just going to slide the gasket onto this plate and slide it down the shaft. So I'm just going to take my gasket material and I'm going to slide it down on top of the lower half of the water pump assembly. Doesn't take any pressure at all. Then we'll take our new lower plate for the water pump assembly and do the same thing. We'll just slide it down over the shaft. And you don't have to force it. It'll just fall right into place. Okay, one thing about the water pump. Getting this impeller in this little shaft, in this housing, is kind of a pain in the butt. But you have to kind of finagle it. It's not going to fit just perfectly. It'll fit in there, but yeah, it's a little bit of a pain to get in there. Try to get your shaft here aligned with the key that's here. Now, in order to hold the key in place, again, I'm just going to use the original key since this one did not come with a new key. I'm just going to take a little dab of grease and I'm going to put it right here. You really can't see it very well from that angle, but I'm going to put a little grease right here on the shaft. And I'm going to take the rest of it and put it right here on the back of the key. So that way I can take this key now and lay it into place. And for the most part it'll stay there. Now the tricky part is getting this housing slid back down over the shaft. Of course, I'm going to have to turn my impeller a little bit to try to line it up with where the key is. So, and as you can see, that just popped back out again. So this is kind of a pain to get this impeller into this housing. As you can see, I'm kind of struggling with it just to kind of get it lined up enough to where it'll slide into place. Okay, it's kind of hard to see, but I've got the impeller and inside the housing, the upper housing, and I've got the Woodruff key lined up. So now it's just a matter of pushing this down into place enough, sometimes tapping it, to get it to where you can at least get some bite on the threads there. Next step's going to be to bolt this back down. Okay, now I'm going to use that screw. It's going to go right there. I'm going to try to get that to actually torque down to where I can actually get the nuts on the ends of the bolts. Just going to snug it. I'm not going to tighten down real tight. Put your washer on. One of your nylon locking nuts. You got to grab the right one though. And just kind of ease it down just slightly to where it starts to seat everything down. Then you've got access to the other ones. Again, another washer, nylon locking nut. And your last washer and nylon locking nut. Assuming you don't drop it. A little harder to see this back one here, so I'm going to try to hold this up and tighten it down slightly as well. So now with that being a little bit snugged up, I'll go back to my other socket here, since those are two different sizes. Go ahead and continue to seat these down. Those are seated good enough to where the housing doesn't move. Alright, the next step is I'm going to take this little water tube that's going to go right here. It's going to take a little dab of grease, kind of rub it around the edge there, and on the other edge as well. Again, this is all marine grease. Slide it into place, give it a good push, and it's good to go. Next step is to actually take and put a little sealant across this back section here and this front section, just a little tiny bead. I don't know if you can see that or not. See if I can stand it up. On the back section here and on the front section here. And that will allow engine exhaust that goes through here not to enter the water pump. Okay, so I've got my RTV high temperature sealant. I'm just going to take a little dab and I'm just going to coat back plate here. just enough to cover it, not real thick. And a little bit up here on the very front, not much, just enough to coat it. Let that tack up just for a second or two and get ready to reinsert into the lower unit. Okay, so just prior to doing all that, I'm going to take a little bit of grease, put on the teeth of the drive shaft, and turn it around a little bit. Make sure not to get any on the top, otherwise you can have a hydraulic issue where you try to push it back in and it'll actually float and cause you all kinds of problems. It won't fully seat and then you'll damage the gearbox and or the shaft or splines. Just kind of keep rotating it around to where I can put a little grease inside the teeth here. Again, avoiding getting any up on the very, very top here. Next step is going to be a little bit more complicated, because now you have to slide that whole lower assembly up into your lower unit housing. First and foremost, again, I'm going to take a little bit of marine grease. I'm just going to put on the threads here, keep it from seizing up. Kind of get them nice and greased up. Again, these are all held on by washers and nylon locking nuts. And I'm going to do the same thing to the lower unit, which you might be able to see here. Try to line it up the best I can. At this point, it's a pretty good idea to have a nut and a washer ready to lock it down. Now the next stage is to actually slide this lower half into the lower part of your housing. And it may take a minute or two to get that all lined up. And of course, this one here, I have a water tube that's got to go in here as well. And I'm still having a problem with it meshing up with the engine. See if I can turn it. It's definitely easier with two people. And that time you heard it snap, go right into place. Now, at this point, on this particular engine, you've got this threads where you're going to have to pull the engine housing down in order to get the nut on it. But on the back side, you can get a nut and a washer on it. So I'm going to go ahead and get my washers lined up and ready to go. And you got to really be careful trying to get those nuts in there because it's very close quarters. And it sucks when you drop one. So now all those are tight. I still have 2 more to put in. These are a little trickier, because there's not much room to get your fingers in there. Okay, that's got the lower unit completely reinstalled. Of course, you'll want to turn the water on, keep your lower unit as level as possible. We've got water flowing through the water hose. I'm going to let that run for just a minute, just to see if I can get enough water flow. Okay. Prime it up a minute. Drain tube.